Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere you probably shouldn't. The air smells of candle wax, sweat, and something faintly metallic, like a coin rubbed between damp fingers. You stand at the edge of a narrow, cobbled street, and through the mist you can just make out a red lantern swinging lazily from an iron hook. Its glow cuts through the fog, hazy and soft, as if the light itself were tired of witnessing what goes on behind those doors. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The lantern's sway draws your eyes like a hypnotic pendulum. You can hear music leaking from an upstairs window. A single lute strumming a tune so slow it feels like it's falling asleep mid-melody. A woman's laughter follows, low and smoky, the kind of laugh that promises everything and nothing at once. Welcome to the red lanterns of the past. You walk down the street, the soles of your boots slick with whatever the city's been fermenting for weeks. It's late, sometime after curfew, and only the foolish or the desperate linger here. In medieval Europe, this part of town was called many things. Gropekant Lane in London, yes, historians promise that's the real name, or Rue des Filles, DU in Paris. These were the alleys where morality went to sleep long before you did. The smell is a character of its own. Wine gone sour, old tallow, wood smoke, and human musk. You try to breathe through your mouth, but that doesn't help. There's laughter spilling from one doorway, sobbing from another, and somewhere down the street, a lute breaks a string mid-note. It's easy to think of brothels as dens of pleasure, but in the Middle Ages, they were more like an uneasy truce between sin and necessity. Cities tolerated them not because they approved, but because they couldn't stop them. St. Augustine once said, "It was better to have brothels than risk the world being convulsed with lust." Historians still argue whether that quote was meant to justify prostitution or to shame the church for its hypocrisy. Either way, it worked. The brothels stayed. You duck under a wooden sign creaking in the wind. The painted letters have faded, but the image, a heart pierced by a dagger, still catches the lamplight. Inside, the world changes. The noise softens. The air grows heavy with burning resin and rose water. You can feel heat clinging to the walls, the kind that seeps into your clothes. The first thing you notice are the candles. Dozens of them, dripping wax onto pewter plates, their flames wobbling like tired dancers. The light they give off is flattering, if you like mystery. Everything here is blurred at the edges. The faces, the smiles, the stains. You take another cautious step, your boots sinking into rushes spread across the floor. They're supposed to absorb spills and smells. Mostly, they just rustle when you move, whispering little secrets to the dark. At a corner table, two merchants argue over who owes who for a bottle of watered wine. Their sleeves glint with tiny gold threads, showing off as if the women watching from the shadows care about embroidery. They don't. A woman with hair the color of dried wheat leans against a pillar, arms crossed, looking bored enough to sleep standing up. Her dress has been mended more times than you can count, and one sleeve is stiff with candle grease. She catches your eye for a moment and smirks, as if to say, "You're new here." You try not to look too curious, but every detail feels like a discovery. A jug of honey, coloured owl sits on the counter, already sprouting a layer of foam, so thick it could double as insulation. A black cat prowls between stools, tail flicking. Probably the cleanest thing in the room. And then there's the sound. Beneath the laughter and music, you can hear the creak of the floorboards, the clink of coins, the sigh of someone whose night has already gone wrong. The whole place hums with a kind of wary rhythm. There's a strange comfort to it, though. For all its grime and sadness, this world runs on rules. You pay, you drink, you forget. The madame keeps order. The church pretends not to see. And you, for tonight, are just another shadow passing through. You move deeper inside, brushing past velvet curtains that have seen better centuries. A gust of wind from the open door follows you, stirring the smoke in ghostly spirals. You imagine the thousands who have stood where you are now. Sailors, knights, pilgrims, even monks in disguise, all looking for something human, if only for a moment. And yet, survival here is its own profession. For the women, every smile is a calculation, every touch a negotiation. Historians note that some brothels were run under city license, complete with ledgers, taxes, and official inspectors. Others were illegal, operating out of bathhouses or private homes. In either case, everyone knew, and everyone pretended not to. A barmaid sets a clay cup in front of you. The liquid inside looks like it lost an argument with a grapevine. You swirl it, trying not to imagine where the cup's been. The barmaid laughs softly, her teeth small and sharp like a fox's. First time. She asks, but before you can answer, she's gone, vanished into the flickering dark. You watch her go, realizing that names are rare here. Everyone becomes someone else. The girl pouring wine might be Agnes tonight, and Cecily tomorrow. The man she serves will never know the difference, and she'll never tell. It's oddly democratic, in a way. The brothel is one of the few places where class briefly dissolves. A lord and a peasant might share the same room, the same infection, the same fleeting lie. But outside these walls, that illusion dies with the dawn. You glance around. On the far wall hangs a tapestry. Faded reds, gold thread gone dull. It shows a scene from Ovid, or what's left of it, Venus rising from the sea, surrounded by figures who look suspiciously like customers. Someone's spilled wine down the middle, and the goddess now bleeds crimson from her ankle. A door opens upstairs. Wooden steps groan under someone's weight. A man descends, adjusting his belt, eyes glassy, face pale. He drops a coin on the counter, mutters something that might be a prayer or a curse, and leaves. The door slams. The music never stops. It's easy to forget that brothels were part of everyday medieval life, woven into the city's social and economic fabric. Some were even charitable enterprises. Proceeds going to hospitals or almshouses. Historians still debate whether that made them moral compromises or pragmatic solutions to poverty. Either way, the system kept turning. The madam, when she appears, is nothing like you expect. No feathers, no jewels. She's dressed in dark wool, her hair pinned back, her eyes calculating. She moves like someone who's seen too much and forgotten more. Her gaze lands on you for half a heartbeat, long enough to decide you're harmless or broke. She disappears behind a curtain, her shadow sliding along the wall like ink. You sip your drink again, pretending it doesn't taste of vinegar. Somewhere nearby, a girl begins to sing. The melody is old, older than this city. The lyrics tell of a sailor lost at sea, his lover waiting by the shore. Her voice cracks once, twice, and no one seems to mind. Maybe they've all lost someone too. The night thickens. The candles droop lower. You feel yourself drifting, lulled by the rhythm of clinking cups and wary laughter. If you were truly here, flesh and breath, not imagination, you wouldn't last an hour. The smells, the sickness, the heat, the constant pretending, it would crush you. Even the strongest stomach would falter under the weight of this place's reality. And yet, somehow, they endured. For centuries, you lean back in your chair, eyes half closed, feeling the centuries breathe around you. The red lantern outside flickers again, casting long shadows through the doorway, and you realize the truth: this world never really vanished. It just learned to hide its candles better. You step outside again, into the cool midnight air, your lungs grateful for something that doesn't smell like incense, sweat, or boiled wine. The street glistens faintly beneath a wash of moonlight, and you realize just how narrow it really is, barely wide enough for a cart to pass through, even if anyone dared bring one here. Welcome to the Street of Scarlet Doors. They call it that not for poetry's sake, but because nearly every door has been painted some shade of red. Vermilion, crimson, oxblood. In the flickering lamplight, the whole row seems to pulse like a living vein. The red paint, people said, warned, respectable, folk to steer clear. But of course, that only made others more curious. A woman leaning from a window calls to a passing soldier, her voice low, teasing. He laughs, tosses a coin that misses her hand, and it lands in the muck below. Neither of them bothers to look for it. The sound of the coin hitting the ground is swallowed by the noise of the night. Boots, laughter, the distant clatter of dice. You walk slowly, each step careful. Beneath your feet, the cobblestones are slick with rain and something unidentifiable. To your left, a tangle of alleyways curls deeper into the underbelly of the town. You can see the faint orange glow of another brothel sign swaying in the distance. Cities like London, Paris, and Florence all had streets like this, dedicated, tolerated, and strategically isolated. Municipal authorities figured it was better to contain temptation than chase it across the city. In London, the area of Southwark became infamous for its stews, bathhouses that were really just brothels with plumbing. Across the Channel, in Paris, the Rue du Poirier grew so notorious that even local priests warned each other to take a longer path to church. Historians still argue whether these red, painted doors were coded signals for customers or simple decoration. Some say the colour symbolized lust. Others think it was just the cheapest pigment that hid dirt and blood alike. Whatever the reason, the red lingers, half warning, half invitation. As you wander deeper, you notice the layers of sound. A lute somewhere to your right plucks a lazy tune. The melody is cheerful but tired, like it's been played too many nights in a row. A drunk stumbles past, muttering a half-remembered prayer, and vanishes down a side alley. Somewhere, a door slams. A cat hisses. A baby cries. It's strange, there are homes here, too. Families living side by side with brothels, pretending one has nothing to do with the other. Laundry lines stretch above the street, fluttering in the damp wind. A child's toy lies forgotten near a doorway, a small wooden horse, its tail chewed off by rats. You pause under a hanging lantern, watching its smoke twist toward the stars. The air carries the mixed scents of roasted chestnuts from a nearby stall and something darker from the gutters. A man with a bundle of candles on his back shuffles past, his voice low as he calls out his wares. Lights for lovers, lights for sinners. He sings softly, and you can't tell if it's a jingle or a prayer. Ahead, a crowd gathers around an open doorway where music spills out bright and warm. The sign above it shows a painted swan with a crown, the Silver Swan. It's one of the finer establishments, if such a thing can exist here. Nobles and wealthy merchants sometimes visit, cloaked and masked, seeking what they can't admit to in daylight. The doorman, a thick, shouldered man with a scar running across his cheek, watches everyone who passes. His eyes linger on you for a moment before he waves you in with a tilt of his chin. Inside, the difference hits you like perfume. Literally. Someone's burned too much mirror. The air is thick and heavy, catching in your throat. Candles in tall brass holders throw golden pools of light across silk cushions and polished tables. This brothel has ambition. It wants to be elegant. You hear laughter, higher, smoother, almost rehearsed. The women here wear better fabric, the men better boots. But the wariness beneath the polish feels the same. You sit near the edge of the room, trying to stay unnoticed. A serving girl glides past, balancing a tray of wine cups. She smells of lavender and smoke. Her dress is laced tight, her smile looser. You watch her move from table to table, always laughing, always light. But you can see the exhaustion hiding in her shoulders, the way she winces every time a hand brushes her arm. This is the part of the medieval city where time doesn't move normally. It stretches, folds, lingers in corners like dust. The madam of this particular house appears from behind a velvet curtain, her gown dark green, her face powdered pale. She's not old, not young either. Somewhere in that ageless space where experience has erased vanity. She surveys the room like a queen counting subjects. She catches your gaze briefly, and for a moment you think she's going to scold you for staring. Instead, she gives the smallest nod, as if acknowledging that you've crossed some invisible line. Now you're part of the night, even if only for a while. A minstrel begins to play, his fingers quick despite the heat. The song is bawdy, predictable, and punctuated by laughter at all the wrong places. You realize humor here is a kind of armor. If you laugh first, maybe it hurts less. The room is alive, but the walls feel old enough to have seen it all before. There's a story embedded in every scratch on the table, every candle stub. If you could listen closely enough, maybe you'd hear the echoes of knights whispering fake names, or friars muttering apologies between confessions. You take a sip of wine. It's surprisingly decent. Someone must have bribed the right merchant. A woman at the next table begins telling a story about a nobleman who fell asleep mid-embrace and had his purse stolen by morning. Everyone laughs, but you notice how quickly they check their own pockets afterward. Outside, a bell tolls the hour. Midnight, or something close to it. The laughter fades slightly, replaced by a quieter rhythm. The low murmur of negotiation. Words like silver, half hour, and private room float through the air like incense. Historians still debate how much freedom women in these houses really had. Some earned enough to buy property or retire. Others were little more than indentured servants, trapped by debts they could never repay. The records blur fact and rumor, much like the candlelight does faces. A sudden commotion draws your attention to the doorway. Two men argue, one drunk, the other pretending not to be. The madam glides forward, her voice calm but sharp. The drunk slurs a protest, but she only snaps her fingers. The doorman appears instantly, lifting the man by his collar and tossing him into the street. The door closes. The music resumes. The illusion repairs itself. You sit back, impressed despite yourself. Power here doesn't wear armor. It wears perfume. A serving girl stops by your table, setting down another cup. "On the house?" she says softly. You look like you could use it. You try to smile, but your throat feels dry. The candlelight dances in her eyes. There's kindness there, but also distance, like a mirror reflecting only what you want to see. The night goes on. Somewhere, a couple disappears up the stairs. The lute player hums under his breath, lost in the rhythm. A faint draft carries the outside world's chill through a crack in the wall, reminding you that dawn will come, whether anyone wants it to or not. You wonder how many lives pass through this single street each year. How many hearts, how many secrets? The answer, you realize, is somewhere between too many and not enough. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the heartbeat of the city in this place. The steady thrum of commerce and confession. The quiet hum of people doing what they must to survive another day. You finish your drink and stand, your legs unsteady. As you step outside, the red doors seem to breathe again, glowing softly against the dark. The night has grown colder, but the air feels clearer. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows too early, confused by the lantern light. And as you walk on, the laughter behind you fades into silence. You keep walking, your boots scraping softly against the cobbles, as the hum of the brothel street fades into something quieter, older. The air smells different here. Damp stone, river breeze, and the faint metallic bite of the city's life source. the public bathhouses. They call this one the Angel's Steam, which is funny, considering angels probably don't hang out where half the clientele leaves itching, in places they shouldn't. You pass through an arched doorway where warm vapor spills out into the night like the breath of a sleeping giant. Inside, it's hard to tell whether you've entered a bathhouse or a brothel, or maybe both. The medieval world didn't draw clear lines between cleanliness and pleasure. The two were soaked together, like herbs steeping in the same pot. Welcome to a house with many names. You step into a world of hissing steam and candlelight. The air wraps around you, thick as milk, carrying the mingled scents of rosemary oil, wet linen, and human fatigue. Naked bodies blur into silhouettes, some lounging by the pools, others whispering in alcoves. A few monks, of all people, are among them, their robes hanging neatly on hooks beside peasants' tunics. Bathhouses in medieval Europe were the great social equalizers. In places like Paris and Cologne, they served everyone, from butchers to bishops. Some genuinely came to wash, others came to forget what needed washing. A balding man dips his ladle into the steaming water, pours it over his shoulders, and sighs in bliss. Beside him, a woman giggles as she wipes her face with a rag that looks only marginally cleaner than the floor. Across the room, two bathmaids carry buckets, skirts hitched up to their knees, bare feet padding silently on wet stone. You try not to stare, but there's too much to take in. The flicker of candles makes everything shimmer, faces, limbs, droplets sliding down skin. It's less erotic than eerie, like being inside a painting where time has gone foggy around the edges. In the Middle Ages, stew houses were often bathhouses by day, brothels by night. The word stew came from the old French estuve, meaning heated room. Ironically, many were sponsored, or at least tolerated, by city councils. Officials argued that if men could vent their urges in contained spaces, they'd cause less trouble elsewhere. Historians still argue whether this was moral pragmatism or civic hypocrisy at its finest. You move through the haze, careful not to slip. The heat makes you lightheaded. A bathmaid offers you a towel that smells faintly of vinegar. You thank her, and she smiles. A wary, automatic gesture. She's missing 2 teeth, but her eyes are bright. "First time?" she asks. You nod. She laughs softly. "Don't worry. You'll get used to the smell. Everyone does." She points toward the far end of the hall, where a wooden staircase leads upward. Up there's the dry room. Costs more, but you can breathe better. You climb the steps, hand on the damp rail. The upper level opens into a wide gallery overlooking the baths below. Thick curtains divide the space into small cubicles. Some open, others closed. From behind one curtain comes the unmistakable sound of laughter and whispers. From another, only silence. You pass a carved sign above one alcove. Private service, 3 pence. Another reads, warm bed. No questions. So much for ambiguity. You duck into an empty corner where a window lets in the faint silver light of the moon. The glass is fogged, but through it you can see the city rooftops, glistening from a recent drizzle. For a moment, you forget the heat and noise. You imagine what it might have been like centuries ago, when knights returned from crusades coated in dust, merchants staggered home from trade fairs, and bathhouses promised not just cleanliness, but a kind of rebirth. Of course, reality was less poetic. The water wasn't changed often. Towels were reused until they disintegrated, and that steam you're breathing in. A fragrant mix of herbs, sweat, and whatever bacteria medieval science hadn't discovered yet. You pull your collar away from your neck, half expecting a cough to start. A man beside you sneezes explosively, nearly losing his towel in the process. You both laugh, awkwardly. For all its grime, there's an odd warmth here. Community wrapped in humidity. People gossip, flirt, argue about the price of fish. Someone's reciting a half-dirty ballad about a miller's daughter. The bathmaid joins in the chorus without missing a beat. You can almost forget where you are. Almost. A priest enters, his tun-short head gleaming with sweat, a crucifix glinting on his chest. Everyone makes space for him, not out of respect, but because it's bad luck to bathe too close to a man of God. He nods curtly and sits near the edge of the pool, muttering something about purity of the flesh. Two women nearby roll their eyes. It's said that in Paris, around the 14th century, the church began cracking down on mixed bathing. Too many scandals, they claimed. Too many confessions. But in smaller towns, no one enforced it. Business was business. The priest eventually leaves, dripping and unsatisfied, and the laughter resumes as if he'd never been there. You wander deeper, past a row of curtained rooms where voices murmur softly. Behind one, a low chuckle. Behind another, what sounds suspiciously like crying. The air feels heavier now, more intimate. You realize that bathing is just the polite word on the sign. What happens here depends on coin and discretion. A small plaque on the wall catches your eye, carved in Latin aqua mundat corpus, sed non animum. Water cleanses the body, but not the soul. Someone's scratched underneath it, in rough French. But it's a start. You smile. People haven't changed much. You find a bench near the far wall and sit. The warmth seeps through your clothes, making your eyelids heavy. A jug of watered wine sits abandoned beside you. You take a sip, sour, but not unbearable. A bathmaid hums as she sweeps up rushes, her tune oddly soothing. She pauses when she sees you watching. Don't fall asleep here, she warns. People who sleep too long sometimes don't wake up. She taps the side of her nose knowingly. The heat takes the breath right out of you. Then she grins. Or maybe the company. You chuckle, though her words linger longer than her smile. A man near the entrance shouts for more hot water, his voice echoing through the chamber. The boy who tends the fire runs off, hauling another bucket from the hearth. The flames flicker in the hearth, dark, throwing moving shadows against the walls. For a heartbeat, they look like ghosts rising through the steam. Some historians believe bathhouses became the earliest safe zones for lovers, spies, and criminals alike. With steam clouding vision and noise blurring words, secrets could be traded as easily as kisses. You wonder how many plots were whispered in this haze. How many names were bought? How many betrayals bathed in warm water before spilling into the streets outside? A door opens suddenly, letting in a gust of cool air. The wind carries the faint sound of bells from the cathedral, ringing far away. You remember that just a few streets over, the clergy are still preaching about sin and penance, while the city steams itself in fragrant contradiction. You stand slowly, stretching the stiffness from your limbs. The air feels heavier now, pressing against your lungs. You make your way back toward the stairs, one hand sliding along the slick rail. The bathmaid who gave you the towel earlier waves lazily, a faint smile on her face. You wave back. When you step outside, the night air hits you like a blessing. Cool, sharp, alive. You inhale deeply, trying to wash the heat out of your lungs. The river's murmur drifts through the alleys, carrying with it the scent of damp wood and distant fish markets. You glance back once at the glowing doorway of the Angel's Steam. The vapor still billows out, soft and white, like a ghost exhaling. And for a fleeting moment, you think you can hear laughter from inside. A sound that's half joy, half exhaustion, echoing through centuries. You follow the steam, cooled air into a quieter lane, where the cobblestones darken with last night's drizzle and the windows lean inward like sleepy eyes. Somewhere ahead, a single oil lamp flickers behind blue glass. It marks a doorway taller, cleaner, more deliberate than the rest. A hint that what waits beyond isn't just another bathhouse or alley den. You've found the domain of the mistress of the house. Inside, The light changes. No candles sputtering here. Each flame burns steady, carefully trimmed. The scent is subtler too: beeswax, dried lavender, maybe a whisper of clove. You cross a polished threshold and realize this brothel isn't pretending to be respectable. It is respectable, at least by medieval standards. Even Vice could wear a tidy apron if business demanded. The woman herself appears from behind a carved screen. She's neither young nor fragile, wrapped in dark wool and authority. A narrow braid coils like a rope down her back, and when she moves, the sound of her keys, dozens of them, tinkles softly at her waist. The keys say more than her expression ever could. "Welcome," she murmurs, not quite smiling. Her voice carries the calm of someone who's already handled tonight's worst problems before supper. "You're not lost, are you?" You start to speak, but she waves a hand. No one gets lost here. They just forget where they meant to go. Her name, she tells you, is Dame Katrine, though you doubt that's the one she was born with. Every brothel has a Katrine, a Marjorie, a woman who learned to turn shame into currency and chaos into order. She runs the ledgers, settles disputes, and pays the constable his quiet stipend. She's equal parts mother accountant and judge. She gestures for you to follow. The hallway stretches narrow, lined with heavy curtains that divide the house into chambers of varying luxury. "We keep 3 levels," she explains, her tone dry. "For coin, for comfort, and for consequence." You raise an eyebrow. "The first floor," she says, "is where most begin. Sailors, soldiers, anyone with 2 pennies and no questions. The second floor's for merchants and scribes who think privacy buys romance. The third," she pauses, lips quirking. "The third is for those who can afford to forget their own names." You pass a small desk stacked with parchment, wax seals, and a chipped abacus. Behind it sits a girl writing by candlelight, her quill scratching steadily. "Inventory," Dame Katrine says. "Linen, wine, soap. I count every drop and crumb. The girls keep what they earn, less board and laundry. Fairness keeps the peace." You think of the chaos outside, the street brawls, the drunken shouting, and realize this place survives because she runs it like a guild. City Watch leaves you alone. You ask, "Most nights," she says. "The bishop's nephew enjoys our dice games. When he stops, perhaps the watch will remember their morals." A laugh slips from her throat, brief and low. You enter a common room softly lit by a hanging lamp shaped like a star. Women lounge along benches, some sewing, others chatting over watered aisle. One sharp-eyed girl balances a ledger on her knee, counting coins into tidy stacks. A tall, freckled woman hums a tune while plaiting another's hair. The air feels strangely domestic, as if you've stumbled into a monastery run backward. A small cat stretches on the hearth, tail curling like smoke. He eats better than most men who come here, Dame Katrine notes. One of the girls looks up. That's because he catches more honest work. Laughter follows, quick and genuine. For a moment, the illusion of comfort almost holds. You can imagine these women sharing stories of home, trading ribbons, teasing each other about clients who snore. But then you notice the scars, tiny white lines along wrists and fingers, burns from candle wax or clumsy matches. You notice how often eyes flick toward the door whenever footsteps sound in the hall. Still, there's pride here. We clean every room ourselves, Katrine says, almost defensive. No filth, no vermin. The Lord Mayor's clerk stays here when he's in his moods. You ask how she keeps her staff safe. Her gaze hardens slightly, the warmth fading from her tone. "Safe," she repeats. "There's no safe. Only safer." She shows you the back courtyard, walled high and hidden. Rainwater drips from the eaves into a barrel. If a man turns cruel, the girls scream for the stable hand. He carries a club thicker than mercy. She gestures to a narrow door in the wall. That leads to the alley. Every room has one. We don't trap anyone. Not clients, not girls. Doors open both ways. You file that away as quietly heroic, though she'd likely call it practical. Historians still debate whether women like Katrine were emancipated entrepreneurs or just survivors granted illusionary power. Some city records list them as taxpayers, others as criminals. What's clear is that they existed between worlds, too clever for obedience, too compromised for respectability. She leads you upstairs, the boards creaking underfoot. "You'll want to see the parlor," she says. "That's where I greet the important ones." The parlor gleams with polished wood and embroidered cushions. On the wall hangs a painted panel of Saint Mary Magdalene, not as penitent sinner, but as serene businesswoman, holding a jar of ointment like an accountant's ledger. The irony is thick enough to spread on bread. Beneath the painting sits a locked chest. Katrine places a hand on it. "Accounts," she says simply, "and letters. Men write foolish things when they think we care." You glance toward the curtains behind her. The air carries faint perfume, violet and clove. "Do you ever read them?" Her smile returns, sly this time. Only when the spelling's good. You can't tell if she's joking. From below, laughter erupts again, the kind that teeters between joy and exhaustion. A lute strikes a few clumsy notes. Someone coughs. The house exhales life. Katrine leans against the doorway, watching you with an expression that could be sympathy or curiosity. "People think this place runs on desire," she says. "It doesn't. It runs on fear. Fear of hunger, fear of loneliness, fear of judgment. I just make sure the fear pays its rent." You think of the red-lit street, the steaming bathhouse, the endless churn of faces. She's not wrong. A girl appears at the top of the stairs, breathless. "Mistress, there's a man downstairs demanding his coin back." Katrine sighs. "Tell him he's welcome to earn it." The girl giggles and darts away. Katrine straightens her sleeves. "Excuse me," she says, already halfway down the stairs. Business never sleeps. You remain for a moment in the quiet she leaves behind. The lamplight flickers, and outside, thunder murmurs somewhere over the river. You imagine her below. Calm voice, sharp eyes, sorting quarrels, collecting dues, keeping order in a world built on chaos. A fragment of conversation drifts up. "No, my lord, you'll pay first. Even salvation requires a deposit." You smile despite yourself. When you finally descend, the main hall is nearly empty. The cat has claimed the hearth again. The girls have vanished into rooms above, voices fading like dreams into candle smoke. Katrine stands by the door, counting coins into a leather pouch. She looks up as you approach. "You've seen enough," she says, not unkindly. "Best leave before the watch changes." They start asking names after dawn. You step outside. The rain has stopped, leaving puddles that mirror the red lanterns overhead. The door closes behind you with a soft thud, and the street exhales its eternal sigh. Somewhere far off, a church bell tolls 3. You wonder if the priest who rings it knows where his brother spent the night. You walk away from Dame Katrine's house and back into the wet night. But her voice still trails behind you, low and steady like the echo of an old song. The brothel's glow fades until only the smell lingers. A faint cocktail of wax, smoke, and lavender fighting the stink of the gutter. You follow the street downhill, where the paving stones grow slick with slop, and the sound of laughter gives way to the cough of the city's unseen machinery. Wagons creaking, shutters slamming, distant dogs arguing with the moon. A new kind of light cuts through the mist ahead. Thin, nervous candlelight spilling from half open doors and cracked windows. This is where the working girls of the lower quarters live and labour, outside the clean control of houses like Katrine's. If her establishment was the illusion of order, this street is the raw draft before polish. You can smell desperation here. It has a texture, sharp and metallic, like iron left in the rain. You step over a puddle that glows faintly red from a lantern reflection. The mud hides things: coins, bones, maybe a misplaced tooth. You almost don't want to know. At the corner, a woman in a rough brown gown sits beneath a torn awning, brushing tangles from her hair with a broken comb. Her sleeves are rolled to the elbow, her skin marked by the faint scars of old bites and burns. Yet she hums, sweetly and off key, as if the night were a friend. She looks up when she sees you. "Looking or lost?" she asks, not unkindly. Her accent carries the music of the countryside, a reminder that most of the women here were once farm daughters, tavern maids, or wives who ran out of choices. "Neither," you say. "That's what they all say," she replies, smirking, until the weather turns. You ask her name. "Agnes," she says, "but folks call me Ash, because I don't burn anymore." She laughs at her own joke, though there's no mirth in it. Ash tells you the street belongs to no one and everyone. The houses here are unlicensed, the women self-employed, or, in polite city terms, vagrant. They rent rooms from landlords who pretend ignorance and pay bribes to guards who pretend virtue. "We don't get keys or locks," she says, "but we get freedom." Sort of. Historians still argue whether that freedom was real or rhetorical. Some claim independent workers earned more coin. Others point out they also bore every risk alone: disease, violence, starvation. Either way, autonomy came with splinters. Ash gestures toward a doorway across the lane. "See that one? 3 of us share it. Costs 2 farthings a night if you bring food." You peek inside. The room beyond is narrow and nearly airless, walls sweating from too many breaths. A straw mattress slumps in the corner. Above it, a rosary hangs beside a cheap wooden charm shaped like a heart. Faith and superstition nailed side by side, just in case one forgets its job. A man stumbles past carrying a bucket. The smell that follows him answers the question you didn't want to ask. Yes, it's a latrine bucket. And yes, someone has to empty it before dawn. "Don't worry," Ash says softly. "You'll get used to it." You hope she's joking. A few steps farther down, laughter bubbles from an open window. A pair of young women share a stale loaf of bread, giggling over something scrawled on parchment, probably a bawdy song or a fake love letter. They notice you and wave, one holding up her crust like a toast. "Blessed night. Stranger." You nod back, trying to smile, but you can't shake the weight of exhaustion hanging over every doorway. It's as if the whole street is holding its breath, waiting for something kind that never comes. Still, there are moments of rebellion here. A cat sits on a barrel wearing a scrap of ribbon around its neck. A girl paints her shutters blue, though the rain will strip it off by morning. Someone's left a tiny posy of daisies in a cracked cup outside a door, proof that hope can grow even in muck. You ask Ash how she started here. She shrugs. "Same as most. Husband went to war. The cow died. The rent man didn't." The line is delivered with wary precision, as though rehearsed 100 times. You realize that each woman probably has a version of the same script. Losses rearranged like verses in a grim hymn. In the distance, a bell tolls 4. That's when the respectable world stirs. Bakers light their ovens, milkmaids trudge through rain, and the brothel lanes begin to fade back into invisibility. The women vanish behind curtains, extinguishing their lamps as if erasing evidence of their own existence. Ash sighs. "Were ghosts by sunrise," she says. "And ghosts don't get to complain." You follow her to a narrow alley where a small shrine glows faintly with melted candles. Someone has left offerings: bread crusts, wilted herbs, even a child's wooden toy. "Saint Mary Magdalene," Ash explains. "She's ours." They say she understood. You look closer. The saint's painted face is chipped, eyes worn blank from years of smoke. Still, someone has redrawn the smile in charcoal. Devotion on a budget. Does it help? You ask. Sometimes, she says. Mostly it reminds us that even saints had bad reputations. You stay by the shrine for a while, watching dawn leak into the sky. The air cools, damp with mist and chimney soot. Somewhere behind you, a door slams, and a man curses softly. The street empties, leaving only the smell of wet wood and cheap oil. Where will you go now? Ash asks. Nowhere yet. You answer, I'm still trying to understand. She studies you for a moment. Then understand this. Most of us didn't fall. We were pushed. Her voice doesn't tremble. She tucks her comm into her belt and disappears through a doorway, leaving you alone with the sound of dripping eaves. You realize you've spent an entire night moving deeper into a world most people of your time would never acknowledge. But for medieval cities, this world was essential. Officially condemned, unofficially tolerated, its taxes filled treasuries, its secrets filled ledgers, and its people filled the silence between sermons. A rat scurries across the stones, pausing to sniff a scrap of lace. Life, in its stubborn way, continues. As you turn to leave the alley, the first baker of the morning opens his shop. Warm bread scent rolls out, masking the stink of the gutter. The contrast hits you hard. One door sells warmth, the next survival. Both keep the city running. You wonder, as you step into the grey dawn, what Katrine's house looks like in daylight. Its candles snuffed, its curtains drawn tight. You wonder if the city will ever let its ghosts rest. Historians still argue whether brothels offered protection or exploitation, liberation or imprisonment. Maybe the truth, like the air of this alley, is somewhere in between, thick with contradiction. The wind picks up, stirring the trash along the curb, and you can't help but smile. Medieval life, you think, never promised comfort, only stories. And tonight, you've collected more than enough of those to last until sleep. You breathe in the sour, sweet perfume of dawn, and move on toward the river, where rumor says the next layer of the city's secrets waits just beyond the fog. You follow the narrow road toward the river, drawn by the hum of the waking city. Smoke unfurls from 100 crooked chimneys, and the bells of the cathedral toll 6 times, echoing like the heartbeat of an empire that never truly sleeps. The air tastes of salt, fish, and bread, the perfume of survival. Ahead, a line of wagons rattles over the cobblestones, bringing grain from the countryside, barrels from the docks, and, for reasons no one wants to admit, customers to the brothel district. The sky is bruised lavender as you reach the riverfront. Here, at the water's edge, the city sheds its pious face and shows its machinery. Barges bob against the pilings, and men shout through the fog, unloading cargo that glistens like treasure until you realize it's salted meat and cheap wine. This is the brothel by the bridge, known in whispers as the Siren's Rest. You'd never notice it if you weren't looking. From the outside, it's just another tavern. Cracked plaster, crooked door, a painted sign of a fish with improbable curves. But inside, it hums with the rhythm of 1,000 lives colliding. You step through the door, ducking under the low beam carved with the Latin phrase Omnia Venalia Sunt. Everything is for sale. The smell hits first wine, swept smoke, and perfume barely covering mildew. Candles sputter in iron sconces, casting shadows that shimmy like drunken ghosts. The floor tilts, warped by years of spilled ale and heavy boots. You feel the boards groan beneath your feet, like an old drunk muttering secrets. A man at the counter looks up from his cup. His hair is thinning, his tunic stained, and his eyes carry that familiar glaze of someone who's traded too many nights for too little rest. Morning, he says, though it sounds like an accusation. You nod. Busy night, he snorts. They're all busy. The plague scared off the fancy ones, but sailors never stop docking. That's the first mainstream fact of the morning ports were magnets for vice. Where trade flowed, so did sin. Cities like London, Lubeck, and Marseille kept brothels near docks because it was easier to regulate sailors than to stop them. You can almost hear the medieval mayor's logic: keep the filth contained, and the rest of the city sleeps easier. At the far end of the room, a musician plucks a lute out of tune. The melody staggers but somehow holds together, just like the clientele. Men from everywhere, Norsemen with sunburnt faces, Gascon traders, a Templar deserter still wearing his cross, sit shoulder to shoulder, united by ale and exhaustion. Behind them, the women work like clockwork. One pours wine with a wink so practiced it might as well be choreography. Another lounges on a bench, yawning wide enough to show a missing tooth. And in the corner, a red-haired girl with a freckled nose threads a needle, mending a ripped hem on her own skirt. Her name, someone whispers, is Brothel of Bristol, a survivor of 3 plagues, 2 husbands, and 1 fire. You believe it. Her hands move with the calm precision of someone who's seen enough endings to make peace with beginnings. She glances up at you. You're new. Just passing through, you say. Her smile curves sideways. Aren't we all? You sit near her, careful not to step on the cat asleep under the bench. The cat opens one eye, decides you're harmless, and goes back to ignoring history. Breda keeps sewing, the thread glinting in the candlelight. They say the river gives what it takes. She murmurs. Sometimes it brings sailors. Sometimes it brings bodies. You follow her gaze toward the window. The grey water ripples with morning light, hiding what lies beneath. Historians still argue whether the Siren's Rest, or its real counterparts, were sanctioned by the city or simply tolerated for convenience. Some records suggest an official seal from the mayor's office. Others hint at periodic raids, conveniently scheduled after tax collection. Bureaucracy, it seems, has always had a sense of humour. Breda sets down her needle. You ever seen a mermaid? She asks. You blink. No. She grins, showing that missing tooth. Good. Means you still have your soul. You laugh softly, assuming it's a joke. Then she leans in. The river women talk to them, you know. The ones who wash the dead. They say a mermaid's tale sometimes floats by, silver as sin, cold as confession. But if you fish it out, you die before dawn. You can't tell if she believes it, or just enjoys your discomfort. But medieval people lived elbow to elbow with superstition. Even the most devout confessed to fearing the water's ghosts. Once. Breda continues. A man dragged a shape from the mud. A girl, or so he thought. Her hair long, her skin pale. He carried her to this very room, laid her on the table, and asked for wine to warm her. By the time he turned back, she pauses, eyes glinting. She was gone. Only puddles left. You raise an eyebrow. And he, dead by sunrise. Heart burst, they said. You smile faintly. Convenient. True, she says. Convenient things often are. A shout from across the room interrupts her. 2 sailors argue over dice. One slams his fist, spilling ale. The other reaches for a dagger, but the barkeep, without looking up, tosses a bucket of water straight at them. Not before breakfast, he mutters. The room bursts into laughter. Even Breda chuckles, shaking her head. Men, she sighs. Always trying to prove something to gravity. You think about how much of this world balances between violence and laughter, decay and defiance. Even in poverty, there's a strange dignity here. People inventing moments of joy the way monks illuminate lettuce with colour, with patience, with the awareness that light never lasts. A tall man in a faded cloak enters, dripping from the rain. The room hushes briefly. Respect or suspicion? Hard to tell. He nods to the barkeep, drops a coin heavy enough to clink like gilt, and vanishes upstairs. Breda watches him go. Night, she whispers. They come here to forget the vows they couldn't keep. You ask her what she comes here to forget. Nothing, she says, threading her needle again. I remember everything. It's how I stay alive. That quiet statement lingers longer than the smell of wine. Outside, the sun crawls higher, bleeding pale gold into the fog. The dockworkers shout louder, and the church bell across the water rings the morning mass. Some of the men in the tavern cross themselves out of habit, others out of fear. Breda finishes her sewing and stands. "You want to know how not to die in a brothel," she says. You look up, intrigued. "Leave before someone remembers your name." Then she's gone, vanishing behind a curtain toward the back rooms, where the air hums with muffled voices and secrets thick as incense. You remain seated, listening to the slow rhythm of footsteps upstairs, to laughter that's both tired and sincere, to the sound of the river murmuring against its banks like an ancient witness. Somewhere out there, priests are preaching purity, merchants are counting coins, and wives are pretending not to know where their husbands disappeared last night. The whole city runs on denial, and brothels like this are its unspoken engines. You take one last look around. The barkeep refills cups without asking. The lute starts up again. Still off key, still beautiful. And the cat stretches, yawns, and curls deeper into the straw. You stand, push open the door, and step into the thin morning light. The bridge arches above you, stone slick with mist. Beneath it, the river moves like a slow confession, swallowing everything without judgment. Coins, corpses, secrets. You breathe deep and keep walking, certain that the next corner will reveal something even stranger about this city that never quite decides whether to pray or sin. The bridge stretches behind you like a grey rib across the river's chest. You follow the curve of the embankment, where barges knock gently against the stone, and laundry lines flutter with shirts that may never feel truly clean. The city is fully awake now. Roosters calling from hidden courtyards, ironmongers shouting, and the soft thud of bread loaves hitting wooden counters. Yet you, ever the wanderer, aren't ready for daylight. You've tasted too much of the night's truth to go back to the world of shopkeepers and sermons. So you take a turn most citizens would avoid. A narrow, damp alley slanting toward the poorer wards, where the brothels lose even their pretense of glamour. This, you sense, is where the city's forgotten souls gather, the brothel's invisible labourers, the ones who work not for pleasure or coin, but for necessity. A bent figure shuffles from a doorway ahead, carrying a bucket that sloshes dark water. The smell tells you what it is before you can ask. Chamber pot runoff, destined for the gutter. The woman sets it down, wipes her brow with a sleeve that used to be white, and looks up with eyes that still hold mischief. "Careful, sweetheart," she says. "You'll ruin those fancy boots." You look down at your mud, spattered shoes, then back at her. "You work here?" She grins, showing 3 good teeth. "Everywhere and nowhere. They call me Mother Pernal, washer of sheets, keeper of secrets, and witness to too many stains, literal and otherwise." You chuckle softly. "Hard work," she shrugs. "Harder to die of hunger." Mother Pernal leads you to a small courtyard behind a sagging building. Steam curls from a row of wooden tubs, each one filled with linen steeping in grey water. The smell of lye is sharp enough to sting your eyes. She rolls up her sleeves and plunges her arms into the nearest tub. "They think the girls are the dirty ones," she says, "but these sheets, they tell the real stories." And indeed, this is the unspoken backbone of every brothel. The laundresses who keep it from collapsing under its own filth. A mainstream, historical fact. Medieval brothels employed washerwomen, not only to clean bedding but to inspect it. Blood, vomit, or worse could signal disease, which meant loss of income and risk of closure. So, in a sense, laundresses were the earliest public health officers. Pernal grabs a paddle and stirs the tub like a witch at her cauldron. "Some nights I wash until my fingers split. In winter, the water turns to ice before I'm done. You'd think the masters would care. Disease kills profit, after all. But no, we're ghosts. Can't infect what no one sees. You ask if she ever worked inside the brothel proper. Her expression falters. Once, she says. A long time ago. Before the cough. She gestures to her chest, where her breath rattles faintly. They don't want girls who sound like broken bellows. So I scrub instead. But scrubbing has its advantages. I hear everything. She leans closer, lowering her voice. For instance, did you know some noblemen pay extra to be whipped with their own belts? Others bring their wives' veils, so they can pretend confession works better when it's sweaty. You blink, unsure whether to laugh or apologize to history. Don't look so shocked, she says, smiling. Since the only thing that gets recycled properly in this city. She tosses a sheet over a line. Drops of grey water splatter your sleeve. The air smells faintly of wood smoke and wet wool. Pernell continues. When the plague came, the brothels closed for a month. Thought it was God's punishment. But after the priests started dying too, guess what? They reopened. The city needs its distractions. That's the quirky tidbit of this section during outbreaks. Some medieval authorities did indeed temporarily close brothels, only to reopen them once they realized the bans encouraged street prostitution instead. Public sin, it turned out, was easier to tax than eradicate. Historians still argue, she says, wringing out a sheet, whether those closures were about health or hypocrisy. Personally, I say it's both. You help her hang another sheet. It flaps in the chill wind, a ghostly banner of work unseen. The sky above is pale and thin, promising rain. A door creaks open across the yard, and a young boy appears, no older than 12, carrying a wooden bucket. Mam says the men in room 3 want their supper washed out quick, he says. Tell your mam the men in room 3 can wait. Pernell replies, waving him off. The boy scampers away, leaving muddy footprints. You ask quietly. Children work here too. Course they do, she says. Someone's got to fetch and carry. The church says we're all sinners anyway. Might as well start early. There's no bitterness in her tone. Only the wary pragmatism of someone who's lived long enough to stop expecting fairness. As she works, she hums a tune that sounds familiar. A cradle song turned coarse by time. The rhythm matches the slosh of water and the squeak of rope as the lines sway. It's strangely soothing, this ritual of filth turned clean again. You realize she's part of the brothel's heartbeat, one that never appears in poems or records. She points toward a small building at the corner of the yard. That's the infirmary, she says. The girls go there when the herbs don't work, or when they need to disappear for a week. You hesitate. Disappear. She meets your gaze steadily. Sometimes a man leaves more than coins, and not all of it lives to cry. The words land heavy. You see now why the washerwomen whisper prayers as they work, because they cleanse what cannot be confessed. She dips another cloth, her hands moving slower now. There's talk. She says softly that the bishop wants to build a reform house for fallen women. I say let him. Just make sure he builds one for fallen men too. You laugh under your breath. That would be revolutionary. Revolution's just another word for laundry, she says. It all comes back around. You help her finish the last sheet, feeling oddly honored by the task. When the line is full, the courtyard shimmers with white banners in the wind. Temporary peace treaties between sin and cleanliness. Mother Pernell wipes her hands, squints at the sky, and says, rain's coming. You best get inside before it ruins all my hard work. You thank her. She grins. Come back tomorrow. I'll teach you which stains tell lies. As you step away, a drop of rain hits your cheek, cold and honest. The city exhales again, gutters gurgling to life. You glance back once. Pernal stands among her drying sheets, a grey silhouette against the rising steam, humming that same lullaby. For a moment, it feels like she's washing not just cloth, but the world itself, trying, one bucket at a time, to make it bearable. You turn down the next alley, where the brothel's outer wall meets the city's lower bridge. The smell of the river rises again, thick and steady, somewhere beyond the rain. Bells begin to toll for mid-morning mass, but you keep walking, unwilling to trade the truth of Pernal's courtyard for the comfort of prayer. The rain quickens, warm and heavy, washing the cobblestones clean, or at least clean enough to begin again. You walk beneath the city's dripping eaves, the scent of wet stone rising around you. The rain has turned the alleys into silver threads, winding through the heart of the old district, where walls lean close enough to whisper. Lanterns sway from their hooks, their wicks hissing faintly. Somewhere ahead, music hums. A faint, tinny tune from a cracked lute, just steady enough to tug you forward. You follow the sound through a warped wooden doorway, where a faded sign hangs crookedly above. The Pilgrim's Mercy. Inside, the air is thick with pipe smoke and damp wool. Tables crowd the room, and every bench holds a patchwork of humanity. Sailors, gamblers, and off, duty guards drinking, as though to forget their pay will never stretch far enough. At the back, a man plays that battered lute. His fingers are quick, though one hand trembles slightly between chords. His song is no hymn. It's the kind of melody that sounds like it remembers being forbidden. The tune loops, mournful yet seductive, and over it, a woman's voice rises, husky soft and unflinching. She sings of a cardinal who loved a nun, a story the church would rather forget. He wore scarlet for his sins, she wore white for his shame, and between them bloomed a garden that bore neither name. You stop in the doorway, the room's murmur fading, as the words settle like dust. The singer stands beside the lute player, her dress simple, but her presence undeniable. She's not young in the way brothel girls are trained to appear, yet something about her commands silence. A single silver streak cuts through her dark hair, her eyes, sharp and gold brown, find you before you can pretend not to stare. When the song ends, applause breaks out, not the kind born of joy, but of recognition. The crowd claps, as though trying to bury its own guilt beneath the sound. The woman nods once, then steps away from the makeshift stage, collecting coins in a small wooden bowl. You catch her near the hearth. "That song," you say quietly, "was that your own?" She smiles without warmth. "No song is anyone's own, not after it's sung enough times. They just pass through us, like ghosts looking for mouths." You introduce yourself, but she shakes her head. "No names here," she says. "I'm called Mara. It'll do." You sit together by the fire, its light flickering over her face. The lute player packs his instrument carefully, his trembling hand noticeable again. She follows your gaze. His name's Elias. Lost 2 fingers in a raid years ago. Plays like he's still got 10. You nod. You both seem professionals. Her laugh is dry. "If you mean we've done this long enough to stop believing in applause." Yes. The barkeep brings 2 mugs of watered wine. You sip, though the taste is more rain than grape. Mara leans back, watching the fire. "You want to know about the song," she says, not asking. "Yes." "Was there truly a cardinal and a nun?" "Many," she replies. "But this one mattered. He built a chapel for her in Avignon, they say. Called it Sancta Penitentia, though there was nothing penitential about it. When she bore his child, he hid her in the cloisters, sent the infant away to a monastery in Florence." You blink. "Did they survive?" She tilts her head. "History says he repented, which means he was caught. The nun's name was erased, her body buried in consecrated soil only after her death was declared by fever. But the locals whispered otherwise, that the fever was a rope. Her tone doesn't wait. The church called it scandal. I call it arithmetic. One woman's life equals one man's absolution. You let the silence stretch. Outside, rain thunders on the roof. Elias returns, his lute slung across his back. We're leaving, he murmurs to Mara. She nods, finishing her drink. Before she goes, she looks at you again. The song's not about the past, you know. It's about the present. Every age has its sanctified lyres. Then why sing it, you ask? To remind them we remember. She drops a coin on the table, enough to pay for both your drinks, and walks out into the storm. Elias follows, the lute's strings vibrating faintly as if echoing her final note. You sit alone now, watching the door sway on its hinges. The barkeep, polishing a mug, leans over. She used to sing for bishops, he says, before she learned they don't like songs that tell the truth. You ask where she performs next. He shrugs. Wherever the church isn't listening. You leave a few coins and step outside. The rain has eased to a mist, soft as breath. The street glows under the lanterns, puddles mirroring every crooked roof. As you walk, Mara's words stay with you to remind them we remember. And you do remember. The laundress's courtyard, the confessional's murmurs, the forgotten saints and forbidden lovers. The city hums with all of them, its stones soaked not only in water, but in the stories no one wrote down. You turn toward the cathedral, drawn by the faint echo of bells. Perhaps the next story hides there, in the shadow of holiness, where truth always waits to be confessed. You stand before the great cathedral now, its spire needling the night sky like an accusation. The bells toll, heavy and deliberate, each note tumbling through the rain, soaked streets, until even the cobblestones seem to vibrate. You can almost hear the echoes travel down to the Brothel district you've just left behind. It's strange, isn't it? How the sound of holiness can drift so easily into places it condemns. You walk closer, drawn to the glow of candles in the lower windows. Inside, you can see priests moving like shadows among pews, their white robes fluttering as they snuff out the last of the vigil lights. The air smells of wax and incense, sweet, choking, oddly comforting. The church has always claimed to despise sin, but it has never been able to turn away from its prophets. In medieval cities like Paris or Avignon, brothels weren't just tolerated, they were licensed. Taxes on sin lined the same purses that paid for stained glass. The bishop's accountants recorded every copper piece, calling them fees for the management of vice. You push open the side door. No one stops you. Visitors wander in and out at all hours. The hush inside feels almost liquid, swallowing sound. You step onto the worn flagstones, your boots leaving faint wet marks between tomb slabs. At the front, a priest kneels before the altar, murmuring prayers. His voice is soft but steady. He could be speaking to God or to his own guilty heart. You can't tell which. You move closer, pretending to study the frescoes. Their saints faded and flaking. Behind them, hidden within centuries of pigment, lie the faces of models. Some real women once known in the streets outside. Art historians still argue whether certain. Angels, in the margins of medieval altarpieces, were actually portraits of famous courtesans who'd paid artists for immortality. The paint gave them what the world denied: permanence. You glance at the priest again. He's young, maybe 30, with the tired face of a man twice that. When he rises, his robes brush the steps like whispers. You expect him to turn toward the nave, but instead he moves behind the altar, disappears through a narrow door. Curiosity tugs at you, the same way it did when you first stepped into the broth. You follow, quietly. Behind the chapel lies a cloister corridor lined with oil lamps. Their glow flickers over wooden chests, shelves of manuscripts, and a curious strongbox stamped with the city's seal. A clerk sits there, counting coins into neat piles. His quill scratches on parchment as he tallies figures. Offerings, you ask. He startles, then relaxes when he sees you. Not offerings, he corrects. Livies. He flips the ledger around, and you see neat columns of numbers labeled taxes on stew houses, bathhouses, and licensed women. So, you murmur, the church profits from what it preaches against. He shrugs. Better the holy men collect the coin than the thieves. The bishop says it's an act of mercy, to regulate sin, not erase it. That phrase, act of mercy, sticks to your tongue like ash. He adds, each year during Lent, the city closes the houses for 40 days, officially for penance. Unofficially, so demand builds up for Easter. Revenues always spike. You nod slowly. And the priests? Some of them visit, same as everyone. He says matter, of factly, dipping his quill again. Confession covers many things. You wander farther down the corridor, until you find a door half open to the cold courtyard. Beyond, moonlight spills over the cloister garden. Rows of herbs, quiet fountains, and marble saints streaked green with moss. A nun walks there, carrying a basket of linens. Her steps make no sound. When she passes beneath an arch, she glances at you briefly, her eyes sharp. You shouldn't be here, she says, not unkindly. I was curious, you admit, about the taxes. Her smile is faint. At the coin of absolution, they always find a way to sanctify it. She lowers her basket onto the stone bench. In truth, the church can no more destroy sin than a lantern can kill the night. It only learns how to charge admission. There's bitterness in her tone, but something gentler too, a wary acceptance. She wipes her hands on her apron. Once, I cared very much about the purity of the world. Then I realized purity is a luxury of the full-bellied. You ask her name. Sister Agnes, she says. Before my vows, I was a midwife. That surprises you. She nods. Half the girls who ended up in the houses came through my door first. They had nowhere else. A child without a husband is a sin. Selling one's body to feed that child is a sin. I suppose, by the church's measure, their whole existence was sin. Her eyes catch the moonlight. But between you and me, I've seen more charity in a brothel than in some monasteries. A bell rings somewhere above, breaking the stillness. She gathers her basket again. You should leave before compline. They don't like wanderers in the cloister. You thank her and step back through the corridor. Near the door, the priest reappears, the young one from the altar. He looks startled to see you emerging from the restricted passage. His gaze flicks to the ledger still open on the clerk's desk. Who are you? I was curious. You say again. His jaw tightens, but his voice stays calm. Curiosity is the devil's door, my son. Be careful which hinges you test. You almost laugh. You mean the same hinges the church oils with coin. For a second, his expression falters. Guilt or anger, you can't tell. Then he crosses himself and says softly, pray for understanding. Even the righteous need bread. Outside, the bells have stopped. The rain has washed the streets clean, but the smell of the city, the mix of incense, wine, and sweat, lingers. You think of Mara's song again, of the cardinal and the nun, and how sin always seems to find sanctuary beneath a steeple. In another century, reformers will call this hypocrisy. In yet another, economists will call it governance. Historians still argue whether the church's tolerance of brothels was moral compromise or social control. You suspect it was both, a convenient marriage of guilt and revenue. You pause under an archway and glance back at the cathedral. Its stained glass glows faintly from within, saints shining like coins held to a fire. Maybe that's the truest image of the medieval soul. A people forever trying to pay their way into paradise with the same silver that built their sins. The street slopes downward toward the river, where the water carries the city's secrets to the sea. Somewhere out there, beyond the glow of holiness and hypocrisy, another song begins, defiant, unmistakably human. You follow it. The song drifts over the water, soft as candle smoke, and you follow it until the river narrows between the workshops of the tanners. The air thickens here, pungent with hides, dung, and the acrid bite of lye. A few torches gutter in their brackets, throwing uneasy light across slick cobblestones. You pull your cloak tighter. Beyond the last of the workshops stands a narrow door, painted with a red cross. It doesn't belong to the church, though it wants to look like it. The paint is old, faded. Flakes of it cling to your glove when you touch the handle. Inside, a man looks up from a long table crowded with bottles. "Careful where you step," he says, voice mild, almost kind. "That's mercury on the floor. Expensive stuff." You glance down. The stone is dusted with glimmering silver, pooled in tiny beads. The man wears no robe or collar, just a stained apron. His sleeves are rolled to the elbow, revealing thin, scarred arms. Behind him hangs a painted sign, Doctor of Afflictions, licensed by City Seal. He smiles as he sees your curiosity. You're here for the night's lesson, I assume. Most newcomers are. The girls send them to me before they fall truly ill. You realize this must be one of those licensed medical chambers attached to brothels, where the city's physicians performed inspections meant to curb disease, though more often they spread it. The doctor gestures to a wooden chair. "Sit and mind your sleeve. I was treating a courtesan this morning. She had what they call the French disease." You hesitate. "Syphilis." He grins, delighted. "Ah, you know the modern term." "Yes." Though here in Florence they still blame the French, and in France they blame the Neapolitans. That's history's favourite cure, isn't it? Blame someone else. He rummages through a box, pulling out a lump of pale, greasy ointment. "Mercury," he says, "rubbed into the skin until the gums bleed. Then we bleed the patient for balance, of course. By the third week, most of them either recover or die, which technically also stops the disease." He says it so gently you almost miss the cruelty in it. You glance around. Shelves sag under jars of powdered herbs and dried roots, mandrake, sage, rue, and something that looks disturbingly like leeches. On a nearby wall hangs a crude diagram of the human body, drawn with too much imagination and not enough anatomy. "Does it work?" you ask. "Sometimes," he admits. "Mostly it keeps the wealthy hopeful long enough to pay twice." He gestures toward a second door. "Would you like to see the hospital? It's not for the faint-hearted." You follow him through, into a chamber lined with straw pallets. The air is hot, thick with sweat, incense, and vinegar. Women lie under thin blankets, some murmuring prayers, others silent. A nun moves among them, spooning broth into open mouths. Her expression is calm, practiced. The doctor lowers his voice. The city calls this charity, though the patients pay in confession, if not in coin. Every week, the bishop sends relic water. I tell them to drink it slowly. It makes them believe they're healing. You kneel beside one bed. A girl no older than 17 stares up at the ceiling. Her lips are cracked, her breath shallow. "Does it hurt?" you whisper. She nods faintly. Not as much as dying clean. You look at her in confusion, and she explains between coughs. "If I die in the brothel, they'll bury me in common soil. If I die here, near holy relics, they'll bless the ground first." You glance toward the doctor, who pretends not to hear. "Do many recover?" you ask. He shrugs. "Enough to make hope profitable." He takes a damp cloth, wipes his hands, and leads you back to his workroom. "You see, my friend, disease is the truest confessor. It forces honesty from everyone, customers, priests, lovers alike. No one escapes without revealing something they meant to hide." He lifts a small vial filled with cloudy liquid. This is distilled rosewater, mixed with vinegar and crushed pearls. The courtesans use it to disguise their breath when the mercury begins to rot the gums. "Beauty," in this tray is always an act of defiance. The candle flickers between you, and for a moment the light catches his face. Tired lined, but not cruel. Historians still argue. He muses whether brothels spread disease or helped contain it. I say both. They're society's fever, yes, but also its warning. You think of Sister Agnes, her quiet acceptance, of Mara, her haunting song. Everyone you've met tonight carries the same contradiction, the mix of sin and survival, holiness and rot. The doctor sees your expression and chuckles softly. You look like you've swallowed too much truth. Here, something to settle the stomach. He pours a clear liquid into a cup. It smells sharp, herbal laudanum, he says. Opium and wine, the era's favourite lullaby. You sip cautiously. The warmth spreads down your throat, blooming slow and heavy in your chest. The shadows grow thicker, softer. Sleep if you need to, he says. You wouldn't be the first to drift off in this chair. Half the city's sins are cured by forgetting them. So let your eyes close for a moment. The hum of rain fades into the rhythmic drip of mercury. Somewhere, a bell tolls midnight. When you wake, the chair beside you is empty, the lamp burned low. The doctor's coat hangs from a peg, and his ledger lies open on the desk. You glance at the page. There are names, scores of them, each followed by neat Latin notes: morbus gallicus, febris pudica, consumptio. One name catches your eye: Mara. The note beside it reads simply: in remission. Still singing, you close the book carefully. The vial of rosewater glows faintly in the candlelight. You take it, not as theft, but as memory, something fragile and fragrant to carry into dawn. As you step outside, the rain has stopped. The city smells of wet stone and smoke. Across the river, the bells begin again, calling the faithful to matins. You wonder if any of them realize how many of the faithless have already prayed tonight, just not to the same God. Your breath leaves a small cloud in the chill air. You think of how medicine, faith, and vice all share one strange truth. Each promises salvation but delivers sleep instead. And maybe, in the soft edges of that sleep, there's mercy. The song drifts over the water, soft as candle smoke, and you follow it until the river narrows between the workshops of the tanners. The air thickens here, pungent with hides, dung, and the acrid bite of lye. A few torches gutter in their brackets, throwing uneasy light across slick cobblestones. You pull your cloak tighter. Beyond the last of the workshops stands a narrow door, painted with a red cross. It doesn't belong to the church, though it wants to look like it. The paint is old, faded, flakes of it cling to your glove when you touch the handle. Inside, a man looks up from a long table crowded with bottles. "Careful where you step," he says, voice mild, almost kind. "That's mercury on the floor. Expensive stuff." You glance down. The stone is dusted with glimmering silver, pooled in tiny beads. The man wears no robe or collar, just a stained apron. His sleeves are rolled to the elbow, revealing thin, scarred arms. Behind him hangs a painted sign, Doctor of Afflictions, licensed by City Seal. He smiles as he sees your curiosity. You're here for the night's lesson, I assume. Most newcomers are. The girls send them to me, before they fall truly ill. You realize this must be one of those licensed medical chambers, attached to brothels, where the city's physicians performed inspections meant to curb disease, though more often, they spread it. The doctor gestures to a wooden chair. "Sit and mind your sleeve. I was treating a courtesan this morning. She had what they call the French disease." You hesitate. "Syphilis?" He grins, delighted. "Aye, you know the modern term." "Yes. Though here in Florence they still blame the French, and in France they blame the Neapolitans. That's history's favourite cure, isn't it? Blame someone else." He rummages through a box, pulling out a lump of pale, greasy ointment. "Mercury," he says, "rubbed into the skin until the gums bleed. Then we bleed the patient for balance, of course. By the third week, most of them either recover or die, which, technically, also stops the disease. He says it so gently, you almost miss the cruelty in it. You glance around. Shelves sag under jars of powdered herbs and dried roots, mandrake, sage, rue, and something that looks disturbingly like leeches. On a nearby wall hangs a crude diagram of the human body, drawn with too much imagination and not enough anatomy. Does it work? You ask. Sometimes, he admits. Mostly it keeps the wealthy hopeful long enough to pay twice. He gestures toward a second door. Would you like to see the hospital? It's not for the faint-hearted. You follow him through, into a chamber lined with straw pallets. The air is hot, thick with sweat, incense, and vinegar. Women lie under thin blankets, some murmuring prayers, others silent. A nun moves among them, spooning broth into open mouths. Her expression is calm, practiced. The doctor lowers his voice. The city calls this charity, though the patients pay in confession if not in coin. Every week, the bishop sends relic water. I tell them to drink it slowly. It makes them believe they're healing. You kneel beside one bed. A girl no older than 17 stares up at the ceiling. Her lips are cracked, her breath shallow. Does it hurt? You whisper. She nods faintly. Not as much as dying clean. You look at her in confusion, and she explains between coughs. If I die in the brothel, they'll bury me in common soil. If I die here, near holy relics, they'll bless the ground first. You glance toward the doctor, who pretends not to hear. Do many recover? You ask. He shrugs. Enough to make hope profitable. He takes a damp cloth, wipes his hands, and leads you back to his workroom. You see, my friend, disease is the truest confessor. It forces honesty from everyone. Customers, priests, lovers alike. No one escapes without revealing something they meant to hide. He lifts a small vial filled with cloudy liquid. This is distilled rosewater, mixed with vinegar and crushed pearls. The courtesans use it to disguise their breath when the mercury begins to rot the gums. Beauty, in this trade, is always an act of defiance. The candle flickers between you, and for a moment the light catches his face. Tired, lined, but not cruel. Historians still argue, he muses, whether brothels spread disease or helped contain it. I say both. They're society's fever, yes, but also its warning. You think of Sister Agnes, her quiet acceptance, of Mara, her haunting song. Everyone you've met tonight carries the same contradiction. The mix of sin and survival, holiness and rot. The doctor sees your expression and chuckles softly. You look like you've swallowed too much truth. Here, something to settle the stomach. He pours a clear liquid into a cup. It smells sharp, herbal, laudanum, he says. Opium and wine. The era's favorite lullaby. You sip cautiously. The warmth spreads down your throat, blooming slow and heavy in your chest. The shadows grow thicker, softer. Sleep if you need to, he says. You wouldn't be the first to drift off in this chair. Half the city's sins are cured by forgetting them. You let your eyes close for a moment. The hum of rain fades into the rhythmic drip of mercury. Somewhere, a bell tolls midnight. When you wake, the chair beside you is empty, the lamp burned low. The doctor's coat hangs from a peg, and his ledger lies open on the desk. You glance at the page. There are names, scores of them, each followed by neat Latin notes: morbus gallicus, febris pudica, consumptio. One name catches your eye, Mara. The note beside it reads, simply in remission. Still singing. You close the book carefully. The vial of rosewater glows faintly in the candlelight. You take it, not as theft, but as memory. Something fragile and fragrant to carry into dawn. As you step outside, the rain has stopped. The city smells of wet stone and smoke. Across the river, the bells begin again, calling the faithful to matins. You wonder if any of them realize how many of the faithless have already prayed tonight, just not to the same God. Your breath leaves a small cloud in the chill air. You think of how medicine, faith, and vice all share one strange truth. Each promises salvation but delivers sleep instead. And maybe, in the soft edges of that sleep, there's mercy. The song drifts over the water, soft as candle smoke, and you follow it until the river narrows between the workshops of the tanners. The air thickens here, pungent with hides, dung, and the acrid bite of lye. A few torches gutter in their brackets, throwing uneasy light across slick cobblestones. You pull your cloak tighter. Beyond the last of the workshops stands a narrow door, painted with a red cross. It doesn't belong to the church, though it wants to look like it. The paint is old, faded. Flakes of it cling to your glove when you touch the handle. Inside, a man looks up from a long table crowded with bottles. "Careful where you step," he says, voice mild, almost kind. "That's mercury on the floor. Expensive stuff." You glance down. The stone is dusted with glimmering silver, pooled in tiny beads. The man wears no robe or collar, just a stained apron. His sleeves are rolled to the elbow, revealing thin, scarred arms. Behind him hangs a painted sign, Doctor of Afflictions, licensed by City Seal. He smiles as he sees your curiosity. You're here for the night's lesson, I assume. Most newcomers are. The girls send them to me before they fall truly ill. You realize this must be one of those licensed medical chambers attached to brothels, where the city's physicians performed inspections meant to curb disease, though more often they spread it. The doctor gestures to a wooden chair. "Sit and mind your sleeve. I was treating a courtesan this morning. She had what they call the French disease." You hesitate. "Syphilis?" He grins, delighted. "Oh, you know the modern term!" "Yes. Though here in Florence they still blame the French, and in France they blame the Neapolitans. That's history's favourite cure, isn't it? Blame someone else." He rummages through a box, pulling out a lump of pale, greasy ointment. "Mercury," he says. "Rubbed into the skin until the gums bleed. Then we bleed the patient for balance, of course." By the third week, most of them either recover or die, which technically also stops the disease. He says it so gently you almost miss the cruelty in it. You glance around. Shelves sag under jars of powdered herbs and dried roots, mandrake, sage, rue, and something that looks disturbingly like leeches. On a nearby wall hangs a crude diagram of the human body, drawn with too much imagination and not enough anatomy. "Does it work?" you ask. "Sometimes," he admits. "Mostly it keeps the wealthy hopeful long enough to pay twice." He gestures toward a second door. "Would you like to see the hospital? It's not for the faint-hearted." You follow him through, into a chamber lined with straw pallets. The air is hot, thick with sweat, incense, and vinegar. Women lie under thin blankets, some murmuring prayers, others silent. A nun moves among them, spooning broth into open mouths. Her expression is calm, practiced. The doctor lowers his voice. "The city calls this charity, though the patients pay in confession, if not in coin. Every week, the bishop sends relic water. I tell them to drink it slowly. It makes them believe they're healing." You kneel beside one bed. A girl no older than 17 stares up at the ceiling. Her lips are cracked, her breath shallow. "Does it hurt?" You whisper. She nods faintly. "Not as much as dying clean." You look at her in confusion, and she explains between coughs. "If I die in the brothel, they'll bury me in common soil. If I die here, near holy relics, they'll bless the ground first." You glance toward the doctor, who pretends not to hear. "Do many recover?" You ask. He shrugs. Enough to make hope profitable. He takes a damp cloth, wipes his hands, and leads you back to his workroom. "You see, my friend, disease is the truest confessor. It forces honesty from everyone, customers, priests, lovers alike. No one escapes without revealing something they meant to hide. He lifts a small vial filled with cloudy liquid. This is distilled rosewater, mixed with vinegar and crushed pearls. The courtesans use it to disguise their breath when the mercury begins to rot the gums. Beauty, in this trade, is always an act of defiance. The candle flickers between you, and for a moment the light catches his face. Tired, lined, but not cruel. Historians still argue. He muses whether brothels spread disease or helped contain it. I say both. They're society's fever, yes, but also its warning. You think of Sister Agnes, her quiet acceptance of Mara, her haunting song. Everyone you've met tonight carries the same contradiction. The mix of sin and survival, holiness and rot. The doctor sees your expression and chuckles softly. You look like you've swallowed too much truth. Here, something to settle the stomach. He pours a clear liquid into a cup. It smells sharp, herbal, laudanum, he says. Opium and wine. The era's favourite lullaby. You sip cautiously. The warmth spreads down your throat, blooming slow and heavy in your chest. The shadows grow thicker, softer. Sleep if you need to, he says. You wouldn't be the first to drift off in this chair. Half the city's sins are cured by forgetting them. You let your eyes close for a moment. The hum of rain fades into the rhythmic drip of mercury. Somewhere, a bell tolls midnight. When you wake, the chair beside you is empty, the lamp burned low. The doctor's coat hangs from a peg, and his ledger lies open on the desk. You glance at the page. There are names, scores of them, each followed by neat Latin notes: Morbus Gallicus, Fabris Pudica, Consumptio. One name catches your eye, Mara. The note beside it reads simply "in remission." Still singing, you close the book carefully. The vial of rosewater glows faintly in the candlelight. You take it, not as theft, but as memory, something fragile and fragrant to carry into dawn. As you step outside, the rain has stopped. The city smells of wet stone and smoke. Across the river, the bells begin again, calling the faithful to matins. You wonder if any of them realize how many of the faithless have already prayed tonight, just not to the same God. Your breath leaves a small cloud in the chill air. You think of how medicine, faith, and vice all share one strange truth. Each promises salvation but delivers sleep instead. And maybe, in the soft edges of that sleep, there's mercy. The dawn hasn't yet broken, and the city glows with that light peculiar to sleepless nights. Grey, trembling, unsure whether to yield to day or crawl back into darkness. You wander toward the old square where the cobblestones still bear grooves from wagon wheels and horseshoes. A low mist clings to the streets like spilled milk. Somewhere a rooster crows, defiant and misplaced among the chimneys. And then, through the fog, you hear the unmistakable jingle of metal, the sound of armor. You pause beside a fountain whose basin is cracked and moss-lined. From the mist emerge two figurous knights, or at least what's left of them. Their chainmail is dull with rust, their surcoats stained from travel. One carries his helmet under his arm. The other keeps his visor down, as though the world has nothing worth looking at. They walk toward the brothel quarter, unhurried but purposeful, their spurs clinking in rhythm. You can almost taste the contradiction, the guardians of chivalry moving toward sin, like moths to light. You follow, though at a distance, curious. The streets are still empty, save for a few sleepy vendors setting up stalls. The knights stop before a building whose painted shutters show faint traces of once bright roses. The sign above the door reads, "The Blessed Rest." A joke, no doubt. They enter without knocking. You linger outside, pretending to inspect the uneven stones until your curiosity wins again. You slip through the door after them. Inside, the air is warm, thick with the scent of spiced wine and fading perfume. The madam, an older woman with silver hair pinned into a fortress of braids, greets them with a knowing smile. Back from the wars, my lords, she purrs. From the Holy Land. The taller one replies, setting his helmet on the counter. His voice is hoarse, perhaps from shouting or from silence. And the holiness didn't follow us home. Oh, she chuckles. It rarely does. Your usual room? He nods. As she leads them upstairs, you find a shadowed corner near the hearth and sit, pretending to study the smoke curling from the fire. The younger knight hesitates on the steps, glancing your way. His eyes, grey and hollow, meet yours for half a heartbeat. There's recognition there, not of who you are, but of what you're doing. Watching, remembering. He follows his companion up the narrow stairs, boots thudding softly. Moments later, the sounds begin. Not laughter or moans, but conversation. You hear the low scrape of chairs, the clink of coins. You move closer to the stairwell, just enough to catch the words floating down. Don't you ever wonder? The younger one says, if we've traded one sin for another. Killing in Christ's name, loving in secret. The older laughs bitterly. Boy, sin doesn't change shape, it just changes clothes. He pours something. The scent of wine wafts through the boards. We bled the desert dry for Jerusalem. And what did we bring back? Dust and ghosts. Better to drown them here than let them whisper. The younger's voice lowers. I can still hear them. The women. The ones we left behind. A pause. Then, pray if it helps. Or pay if it doesn't. Their conversation fades into the creak of wood and the murmur of other voices. You retreat to your chair by the fire, uneasy. The scene feels both intimate and universal. Holy warriors collapsing beneath the weight of their own contradictions. Historians still argue whether knights in the Crusades were paragons of virtue or mercenaries in shining armor. The truth, as always, is somewhere between. The line blurred by blood and coin. Many returned home broke, haunted, and unfit for the peace they fought to defend. And so they found their confessions in brothels, not chapels. The madam returns to the main room and spots you. You're not one of my usuals, she says. Just a listener. Just passing through, you reply. She smiles faintly. That's what everyone says. You notice her hands, elegant but calloused, rings dulled by years of soap and sweat. You've seen many kinds of men here, I imagine. Oh, all sorts. Peasants with empty pockets, priests with heavy consciences, nobles too proud to beg and too lonely not to pay. She leans closer, lowering her voice. But the knights are the saddest. They come in wearing guilt-like armor, then leave it behind on the bedposts. She looks toward the staircase. One of them, years ago, tried to confess to me after a campaign. Said he'd killed women in Acre, children even. Thought sleeping with me would prove he still had a heart. You ask, and did it? She shrugs. He cried. Then he slept. I suppose that's something. She pours herself a cup of watered wine and sips it slowly. You know what's strange? They call themselves protectors of the weak, but they all crave the same thing here. Not power, not flesh, but forgiveness. The kind they can touch. Outside, the sky begins to lighten. A rooster crows again, closer this time. The madam glances at the window. Morning's coming. My girls hate that part. The light shows what the night let them forget. The knights descend the stairs quietly, faces drawn. The older one leaves a small pouch on the counter. The younger hesitates, then reaches into his satchel and sets down a silver cross. For her, he says. The madam touches it gently. For whom, my dear? He doesn't answer. Just turns and walks out into the mist. The older follows, pulling his hood low. You step aside to let them pass, and as they do, the younger gives you a small nod. Acknowledgement, confession, or simply farewell. Then they're gone, their spurs fading into the hum of the waking city. The madam watches them go, then sighs. The church will damn them, she murmurs. But I've seen enough to know heaven's full of men who sinned kindly. Her words linger as you step outside. The sun is just breaching the horizon, gilding the rooftops. You feel the warmth on your face, faint but real, and for the first time tonight, the city looks almost peaceful. You can't help but think that every age has its warriors and its wounds, its prayers and its pleasures. And that maybe, just maybe, they all drink from the same cup before dawn. You keep walking after the nights vanish into the grey light, your steps echoing faintly through the streets that are just beginning to stirs. Somewhere nearby, a baker opens his shutters, and the scent of fresh bread momentarily cuts through the musk of last night's rain and wine. It's strange how quickly the city forgets its sins. Every morning, it dresses itself in steam and bread crusts, pretending that the night never happened. You drift toward the market square, where carts creak into place and merchants set up their awnings. But beneath that bustle, beneath the shouted prices and the clatter of wheels, whispers flow like an invisible current. Brothels, after all, are more than just houses of pleasure. They are listening posts. You hear it in the way two women gossip over onions, in the knowing smirk of a courier with a letter tucked under his belt. Secrets move faster than the morning tide, and everyone in the city seems to trade in them, whether they admit it or not. A voice calls to you from behind a stall of coloured scarves. You're looking for someone, the merchant says, her eyes sharp as flint. Or something. You smile. Maybe just a story. Then you're in luck, she says, tying a crimson scarf around her wrist. I sell those too. She leans forward conspiratorially. Have you heard of the Velvet Ledger? You shake your head. She lowers her voice. Every major brothel in the city keeps one. Lists of clients, confessions, even favors owed. A woman with that book could rule the city, or burn it down. Her gaze flicks toward the western quarter. They say the most famous of them all belonged to the house of Saint Ursula. When the bishop tried to shut it down, the madam threatened to publish every noble's name in her ledger. The edict was forgotten overnight. You can't tell if she's joking. Her smile suggests she's not. Curiosity stirs again, the same dangerous spark that's led you through this entire night. And where is this house of Saint Ursula? Down past the fish market. Look for a door painted blue. You thank her and move on. The fish market is chaos. Barrels of salt and silver scales, gulls screeching overhead, the tang of brine so strong it makes your eyes water. But beyond it, at the far end of a narrow lane, you find the door indeed blue, though faded like sea glass. You knock. A small window in the wood slides open. What's your business? Listening, you say. A pause. Then the latch clicks. Inside, the air is cooler than you expect. Tapestries muffle the sound of the street, and candles burn low in copper sconces. The woman who greets you wears no disguise of youth. Her hair is dark with streaks of silver, her eyes calm but assessing. She carries herself not as a hostess, but as a queen. You're early, she says. Most men prefer the dark. I'm not here for that, you say. I heard about your ledger. A smile barely moves. A scholar then. Something like that. She gestures for you to sit. People have been whispering about that book for years. Some think it's myth. Others fear it's real. Both are right, in their way. As she pours wine, rich and dark. Every city has its shadow archives. The letters never delivered, the confessions never erased. We simply keep ours bound in velvet. You ask if she still has it. She studies you for a long moment, then rises and disappears behind a curtain. When she returns, she carries a small volume wrapped in faded red cloth. She sets it on the table with a reverence usually reserved for relics. This, she says, is a mirror, but be careful what you look for. She untees the ribbon. Inside, the pages are filled with elegant script, names, dates, symbols. Some are marked with crosses, others with hearts or daggers. You recognize one name instantly, a priest from the cathedral. Another belongs to a merchant you overheard earlier, boasting about his piety. There are nobles, soldiers, scholars, all carefully catalogued. Why keep this? You ask. Insurance, she says simply. Men talk more freely when they think no one's listening. But someone always is. She traces a name with her finger. One of these entries ended a war, you know. A duke's mistress learned too much, whispered it here, and within a week armies were marching. That's power. Soft, invisible, and utterly feminine. She closes the book gently. But power like this is dangerous. It attracts both gold and fire. You lean back, watching the candlelight dance across the velvet cover. Historians still argue. You say slowly, whether brothels were dens of corruption or the hidden engines of politics. Her lips curl. They were both. We collected more intelligence in a week than most kings in a year. The difference is, we never pretended to be pure. A sound interrupts you. A faint creak at the window. She rises, peering through the curtain. Spies, she mutters. They've been watching for days. They think I'll sell the ledger. She presses the book into your hands. Take it. If I disappear, at least someone will remember what truth looked like. You hesitate. But, why me? Because you're the only one tonight who asked to listen, not to confess. Before you can answer, the door bursts open. 2 guards push in, their armor gleaming with the city's seal. By order of the bishop. One declares, "This house is to be searched for seditious materials." The madam doesn't flinch. "Gentlemen," she says smoothly, "do you really intend to read the confessions of half your superiors?" They freeze. One glances at the other, uncertain. "We're just following orders." "Then follow them back to the cathedral," she replies, "and tell His Grace that St. Ursula's girls send their prayers." After a tense pause, they retreat, muttering. The door slams behind them. She exhales. They won't try again until nightfall. You hand the book back to her, but she shakes her head. Keep it a while. You'll understand more when the sun rises. You slip it beneath your cloak, feeling its weight. Not heavy, but significant. Outside, the city bells ring again, their tones echoing through the narrow lanes. You glance back once. Through the half-closed door, you see her silhouette against the window, still and unafraid. The ledger presses warm against your ribs. You know somehow that this small, secret book holds the heartbeat of the city. Its sins, its bargains, its memories. You walk on, blending into the noise of the waking streets. And for the first time, you begin to suspect that the true history of the Middle Ages wasn't written in monasteries or castles, but in the margins of ledgers like this one, by women who knew that silence was its own kind of power. The bells fade as you move deeper into the maze of streets. The sky is turning a soft, tired grey, the kind that blurs rooftops into one another. You clutch the velvet ledger beneath your cloak and feel the shift in the air. It's heavier now, charged with something foreboding. You sense it before you see it. The crackdown has begun. A crowd is gathering near the western gate. The murmur of voices rises, then dips, like waves against stone. City guards in drab tabards patrol with a purpose that feels new, almost theatrical. Their boots slap against wet cobblestones. Behind them, a cart creaks forward, its cargo a jumble of painted signs, silk drapes, and smashed furniture. A man in a cleric's robe walks alongside, clutching a small iron cross. His expression is solemn but satisfied. You edge closer. A woman in a torn red dress stands beside the cart, her wrists bound loosely with rope. Her face is streaked with soot and something darker. Grief, perhaps, or disbelief. Be decree of His Grace. The cleric announces, "These houses of moral decay are hereby condemned and dismantled." The women within shall be taken for penance and purification. The crowd mutters. Someone spits. Someone else laughs. The woman lifts her chin. Penance, she says softly. For what? Surviving. A few in the crowd glance away, ashamed. Most don't. You realize this isn't an isolated event. Across the city, the red lantern doors are being boarded up. The laughter that once spilled from their thresholds has been replaced by the hammering of nails and the scrape of wood. You move quietly among the onlookers, absorbing the rhythm of it, the cries of protest, the dull thud of confiscated possessions, the muffled sobs of women, led toward the cathedral steps. Historians still argue whether such purges were born from genuine religious fervor or from political opportunism, whether they cleansed the city's conscience or simply redirected its guilt. But standing here, the answer feels clear enough. It's theater, all of it. A performance of righteousness for those who need to forget how often they've knocked on those very doors. You pause near a tavern whose sign has been half scraped off. A man in a guard's tunic leans against the wall, smoking something sharp and acrid. They say the bishop's cousin got caught in one of the stews. He mutters. That's why this whole show started. You raise an eyebrow, and the women pay for it. He shrugs. They always do. Behind him, flames begin to curl along the edge of a velvet curtain tossed into the street. Smoke twists upward, slow and ghost-like. You can't help but imagine how quickly it'll spread if the wind changes. Further along the lane, the house of Saint Ursula stands eerily still. Its blue door remains closed, untouched, for now. But two guards linger nearby, pretending not to watch it. You slip into a shadowed alley and wait. A rat scurries past your boot. The guards mutter something about orders from above and making examples. One yawns. The other spits into the gutter. When they move off, you approach the door. It opens before you knock. The madam stands there, her posture as regal as ever, though her eyes flick toward the distant smoke. I wondered if you'd come back, she says. They're closing everything. I know. They'll come here next. You pull the ledger from your cloak and set it on her table. You should hide it. She gives a wary laugh. Hide it. My dear, the church already owns half the stories inside. I could bury it in the river, and it would still haunt them. You hesitate. Then what will you do? What I've always done, she says. Survive. Her calm unnerves you. The air smells faintly of lavender and smoke. Somewhere nearby, a door slams, followed by the dull crack of wood splitting. She touches the ledger, her fingers lingering on its worn edges. You should leave before they burn this place too. You nod but don't move. If they come for you, she cuts you off with a small smile. If they come for me, I'll tell them exactly what they already fear, that virtue is cheaper to sell than sin. A sudden shout interrupts her. Boots pound the cobblestones outside. Open in the name of the bishop. The madam's gaze hardens. She pushes the ledger back toward you. Take it. Go. You hesitate for only a second, then slip through a side passage she indicates. The corridor is narrow, lined with faded tapestries. At the far end, a trapdoor leads to the canal. You duck through just as the front door bursts open behind you. You hear shouts, the crash of furniture. A single scream cut short, then silence. When you emerge into the cold, murky light, you're behind the building, standing ankle deep in river water. The ledger is still pressed against your chest. You make your way along the canal, each step echoing softly beneath stone bridges. The city smells of wet ash now. Above you, the towers of the cathedral rise like pale fingers clutching at the sky. You pause at a bend in the waterway. A woman's voice carries faintly from an open window, a hymn, pure and trembling. You can't tell if it's a prayer or a warning. You find a dry ledge beneath the bridge and sit. The ledger rests on your knees. Its red ribbon is damp, its pages crinkled with river mist. You open it to the last entry. It's dated the night before. We lived, and that should count for something. No name, just that. You close the book gently and stare at the reflection of the cathedral lights rippling on the water. The irony isn't lost on you. The city cleanses itself by fire, while its sins float quietly beneath its feet. Hours pass. When the bells ring again, you know that somewhere above you, the last of the red lanterns is being extinguished. And yet, the ledger feels alive in your hands. A heartbeat of stories too stubborn to die. You rise, tucking it back beneath your cloak. Somewhere far off, you can hear the faint murmur of women's laughter. Maybe memory, maybe imagination. Either way, it sounds defiant. Because even if the brothels burn, their whispers will find cracks in the silence. And someday, centuries later, historians will lean over dusty manuscripts and still argue about whether these women were sinners or survivors. But you already know the answer. The canal water glistens as dawn creeps across its surface, silvering the world into a fragile calm. You climb out, boots squelching, and find yourself near the city's outer wall. Behind you, faint smoke still rises from the quarter that once glowed with red lanterns. Ahead, the countryside breathes a quiet the city no longer remembers. You start walking. Each step feels like pulling yourself out of another century. The wind carries traces of everything that's been lost. Rose oil, tallow, seamed lace. You can almost hear the echo of the madam's voice in it. Steady and wry we lived, and that should count for something. It takes a long time before the noise fades entirely. Out here, the world smells like damp grass and manure. Crows pick through what's left of last night's rain. For the first time, you let yourself breathe deeply. But the ledger's weight against your ribs keeps you tethered to the city, to all that you've seen. A dirt road winds ahead toward a small inn, a lonely shape hunched against the morning fog. The sign hanging out front creaks with every gust. The Wandering Swan. You push the door open. Inside, it's warmer than you expect. The innkeeper, an older man with a kindly stoop, nods as you enter. Rough night? He says without looking up from his ledger. You could say that. He chuckles. Aren't they all? You find a seat near the hearth. The fire pops lazily, smoke curling into the rafters. For a while, you just watch the embers shift. You think about how every flame you've seen today has been destructive. Yet this one feels almost gentle, patient. The innkeeper brings you a bowl of broth and a hunk of bread. Where you headed? He asks. You shrug. Away from sermons. That earns a grin. Then you're in the right place. We get more sinners than saints here. You glance toward the few other patrons. 2 merchants snoring in their cups, a washerwoman wringing her hands, and a travelling monk staring into nothing. He looks exhausted, his robes frayed, his tonsure overgrown. Something about him feels familiar. Then you realize you saw him once near the cathedral, preaching fervently about purity. Now he looks like a man who's run out of certainty. He catches your gaze and gives a small, tired smile. You were in the city, weren't you? You nod. I can still smell the smoke on you, he says softly. They burned them. Not all, you reply. Some got away. He lowers his eyes. It won't matter. They'll rewrite it by next week. Say the fires were cleansing, not killing. You sip the broth. It tastes of herbs and quiet regret. History has a way of forgetting what it's ashamed of. You murmur. He studies you for a long moment. Then maybe you should write it down. You don't answer, but your hand drifts to the velvet ledger beneath your cloak. The monk's voice drops even lower. You think I don't know what those women carried. Secrets sharper than swords. Half the nobility would crumble if anyone opened their mouths. You say nothing. He leans closer. Do you know what they called those places in the old texts? Domus misericordiae. Houses of mercy. Maybe they were right. But for a moment, the two of you sit in silence, listening to the fire breathe. Historians will argue, he says finally, whether mercy or hypocrisy built that city. But I think it was both. You meet his eyes. Then maybe the truth is somewhere in between. He smiles faintly. It always is. When he rises to leave, he bows his head slightly toward you, as if to a confession. Then he disappears into the morning fog. You sit for a while longer. Outside, the light grows stronger, but it feels thin, cautious, as if afraid to touch what the night revealed. Eventually, you take out the ledger and open it to a blank page. The parchment is rough beneath your fingertips. You stare at it for a long time, then begin to write, not as a historian, but as a witness. You write about the laughter behind shuttered doors, the courage disguised as perfume, the small acts of rebellion that passed for survival. You write about the girls who hid bruises under rouge, and about the men who bought forgiveness by the hour. You write about the madam who stared down priests with a smile sharper than prayer. When you pause, you notice your handwriting trembling slightly. Maybe it's the cold. Maybe it's something else. You close the book and hold it against your chest. Outside, a rider passes along the road, carrying a banner marked with a cross. He doesn't glance your way. Another wave of reformers, perhaps, heading toward the next city. The machine of morality keeps turning, fueled by fear and conveniently selective memory. You wonder what will happen to the brothels that survive, those hidden behind bathhouse walls or masquerading as guest chambers. Some will endure quietly, shifting shape as times demand. Others will vanish, leaving only rumors and sighs in the margins of chronicles. But memory is stubborn. It hides in songs, in whispered jokes, in paintings where saints and sinners blur into the same face. You think of one of those paintings, Saint Mary Magdalene, her eyes lifted toward heaven, her hair spilling down like unspun gold. The inscription always says repentance, but you've seen enough now to suspect it also means defiance. By afternoon, you're back on the road. The air is soft with dust and distance. You follow the curve of the river, the same one that carried the city's refuse and secrets out to sea. You imagine the ledger floating downstream someday. Pages waterlogged but intact, carried into the hands of someone curious enough to listen. And maybe they'll read your notes and wonder who you were, just as you once wondered about the people who wrote before you. Maybe they'll argue about it in candlelit rooms, their voices calm and scholarly, their hands never having touched the filth or the fear. That's how history works. It polishes what was raw, erases what was inconvenient, and calls it civilization. But tonight, at least, you know the truth hides elsewhere, in laughter muffled behind closed doors, in the courage to survive another dawn. You pause on a hill overlooking the valley. The city lies below, half shrouded in haze. The cathedral's spire glints faintly. Somewhere beneath it, the ashes of red silk still smoulder. You whisper to no one in particular. They'll never erase you. The wind catches the words and carries them east, toward the rising sun. You walk until your shadow stretches thin against the dying light, until the last of the smoke from the city drifts into the horizon and disappears altogether. The ledger stays pressed to your chest like a heartbeat that isn't entirely your own. It's grown heavier, not from ink or leather, but from the weight of every voice inside it. You can almost hear them now, murmuring beneath the wind a chorus of laughter, prayer, gossip, grief. You stop by a riverbank where the reeds whisper secrets to each other. The water is calm, the color of pewter. Somewhere nearby, an owl stirs from a hollow tree, its wings brushing the dusk. You sit and listen. If you close your eyes, you can almost pretend the city never existed, that the world is still simple, that virtue and sin are separate things instead of partners in an endless, crooked dance. But you know better. You've seen too much to believe in simplicity. You open the ledger again. The ink from your earlier notes has dried into faint, uneven lines. You turn the pages slowly, stopping at random. Names, numbers, the occasional smudge from tears or wine. And yet, amid all the transactions and confessions, the pattern emerges, the quiet resilience of survival written between the margins. Historians, you think, will someday sanitize these entries, turning human ache into footnotes. They'll debate how regulated vice contributed to medieval economies, or how fallen women were paradoxically central to urban life. They'll quote theologians, kings, economists. But they'll never capture the trembling moment when a girl lit her first candle behind a red door, wondering how to make herself sound both alluring and safe. You trace the curve of one name with your thumb and wonder if anyone ever spoke it with kindness. The evening grows cooler. Somewhere downstream, a bell tolls, faint, perhaps from another village, maybe from memory itself. It echoes through the air like a last confession. You stand and stretch, joints stiff from the long walk. The world feels older now, the kind of old that has stopped keeping count. You look at the ledger one last time. The velvet faded to the color of dried rose petals. You think of the madam, her unflinching gaze, the priest's trembling hands, the laughter that used to spill through narrow windows. Then you crouch by the water. You hesitate. For a moment, you imagine dropping it in, watching it float away, letting time decide what becomes of it. But you don't. Instead, you slide it carefully into a hollow beneath a stone bridge, dry and hidden. Not forgotten. You whisper, just waiting. The river seems to sigh in agreement. When you turn back toward the road, night has arrived. The stars shimmer above the fields, patient and eternal. Their light falls gently on everything, on saints and sinners, on cathedrals and brothels alike. The universe, it seems, doesn't care what names we give our weaknesses. It only watches, quietly, endlessly. As you walk, you begin to hum a tune you don't remember learning. Something soft and cyclical, like the lullabies sung to calm uneasy hearts. The melody carries over the fields, joins the wind, and for a moment, you feel part of something older and kinder than history. You remember the madam's words, "We lived," and that should count for something. Yes, you think. It should. Wind down, 300 words. And now, as you settle deeper into your pillow, let the noise of that old city fade completely. The fires have gone out. The streets are empty again. The blue door is closed. The candles have burned to puddles of wax. And even the river has stopped whispering. Imagine the quiet now, not the silence of judgment, but the hush that comes when the world finally exhales. The same kind of stillness that lingers after a storm, or after tears, or after laughter that leaves you breathless. The people you met tonight, those lost, half-remembered souls, are resting too. Their stories aren't gone. They're just sleeping, folded into time like pressed flowers in a book. And you've carried them far enough. So you let your thoughts drift, like the ledger hidden beneath that old bridge, safe, secret, untouched by fire or noise. Let the current of sleep take you gently now. There's nothing left to chase, no one left to save. Just the steady rhythm of your breathing and the slow turn of the night sky. Your heartbeat slows. Your eyelids grow heavy. The stars above you blur into soft silver smudges, and the world beneath them becomes kind again. Everything is still. Everything is forgiven. Sweet dreams.